a glittering Manhattan skyscraper, a billionaire laughed at a cleaner's son. To him, the boy was nothing, just another shadow from the world of the poor. But when the young man calmly declared, "I speak 9 languages," the laughter shook the walls until it was silenced. What followed was not just a conversation, but a battle between arrogance and knowledge, wealth and resilience. By the end, the man with billions bowed his head, not to money, but to the power of a mother's sacrifice and a son's unstoppable determination. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light over Manhattan, its rays bouncing off the glass towers and gilding the city in a glow that only the wealthy seemed to truly enjoy. From the top floor of one of those towers, Hassan al-Mansouri sat like a king in his palace. His penthouse office was less an office and more a monument to power. The floor beneath his polished leather shoes was a Persian rug worth more than most people's houses. The walls were draped in imported art, canvases signed by masters long dead. His desk, carved oak from Italy, stood like a throne, and behind it, Hassan ruled his empire of billions, oil, and influence. Hassan himself was a man impossible to ignore. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a trimmed beard lined with streaks of gray that only made him look more distinguished. His suit was white, flawless, tailored to perfection. Thick gold rings clinked as his fingers tapped the desk impatiently. This was a man used to obedience, to power, to people bowing the moment he entered the room. So when Grace Johnson entered, the contrast was almost painful. She wore a cleaner's uniform, the navy fabric faded from years of washing, her shoes plain and worn. Her hands, though neatly folded before her, bore the roughness of someone who had scrubbed, wiped, and polished floors until her skin cracked. Her eyes carried the quiet dignity of a woman who had spent her life working in the shadows of people who never even learned her name. But today, Grace was not alone. Her son walked beside her. He was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, tall and lean, dressed in a modest suit. It wasn't the suit of a wealthy heir. It was carefully pressed, clean, and chosen with purpose. His tie was knotted neatly, his shoes polished, though not new. But it wasn't his clothes that drew attention. It was the way he carried himself, shoulders squared, chin raised, eyes sharp with a light that came not from privilege, but from something far rarer, unshakable self-belief. Hassan's lips curved into a smirk the moment he saw them. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning under his weight, and let out a low laugh that rolled like thunder. "Well, well, Grace, my faithful cleaner. What is this? You've brought your son into my office? Do you want him to apply for a job? Perhaps you thought I needed another janitor? Or is he here to polish the floors for you?" The bodyguards at the corners of the room chuckled at their boss's mockery. Grace stiffened, her lips parting as if to explain, but before she could, her son took a single step forward. His voice was calm, deep, and resonant, a voice that immediately quieted the laughter. "My name is Daniel Johnson," he said firmly, "and I didn't come here to polish floors. I came here to tell you that I can sit with kings. I can speak with anyone, anywhere, because I speak 9 languages." For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Then Hassan threw his head back and laughed so hard the glass windows seemed to tremble. His booming voice echoed against the marble walls, his rings flashing as he slapped the surface of his desk. 9 languages? 9? Your mother scrubs my floors, and you claim to speak 9 languages? What did you do? Watch cartoons in 9 tongues? Boy, do not waste my time with fairy tales. The laughter was cruel, but Daniel did not flinch. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked on Hassan's with a quiet defiance that unsettled the billionaire more than he realized. Daniel did not fidget, did not glance down at his shoes, did not crumble beneath the weight of mockery. He stood tall, his hands clasped calmly before him, a young man who carried the dignity of generations of sacrifice in his spine. Grace's heart raced. She had spent her whole life enduring this kind of belittlement, this cruel dismissal, but her son was different. She could see it in the way he held his ground, in the fire that glowed behind his eyes. He wasn't intimidated by Hassan's wealth. his towering presence, or the jeers of the men in suits. He was unshaken, and that alone was enough to make Grace's throat tighten with pride. Hassan leaned forward now, his grin stretching wide, his voice dripping with arrogance. "So tell me, boy, if you truly speak 9 languages, prove it. Show me something that will wipe this smile from my face." Daniel's lips curled into the faintest trace of a smile, not arrogant, not cocky, but calm. He had been waiting for this moment, for someone to doubt him, to laugh, to challenge. And he was ready. Grace looked at her son, and for the first time in her life, she felt something she had never dared to believe possible in that glittering tower of glass and gold. She felt that her son didn't belong in the shadows of the rich. He belonged face to face with them, and maybe, just maybe, he could rise above them. The stage was set. Hassan thought he had already won, that his laughter had crushed the spirit of a cleaner's boy. But what he didn't know was that Daniel Johnson's next words were about to turn that laughter into stunned silence. Daniel stood a little taller, his shoulders squared, his eyes unwavering as Hassan's mocking smile challenged him. The weight of the billionaire's arrogance pressed against him, but instead of bowing under it, he drew strength from it. He had prepared his whole life for moments like this, though he had never expected it to come in such a grand room, facing a man whose empire stretched across continents. "You doubt me, sir?" Daniel said, his voice steady. "Then let me prove it." Hassan leaned back again, amused. He waved a hand lazily, as if granting an audience to a street performer. "Go on then, boy. Impress me. Make me laugh even more." Daniel turned to one of the guards standing in the corner, a tall man with sharp eyes. Without hesitation, he began speaking in Arabic. His tongue moved with a native fluency, his words rich and fluid, his accent so clean it cut through the air like a polished blade. The guard's eyes widened. His posture shifted. He nodded, astonished. "He speaks it perfectly," the man muttered, half to himself. Hassan blinked once. His grin wavered but did not fall. "Arabic. Fine. That is one. Perhaps you studied. What else?" Daniel's gaze did not falter. He turned smoothly and spoke in French. His voice melted into the soft elegance of Parisian streets, rolling syllables with practiced ease, delivering a short verse as though he were reciting poetry. The air itself seemed to lean in closer to listen. Grace clasped her hands together, tightly, her heart pounding. She remembered all those nights she found him under the dim lamp in their tiny apartment, reading books borrowed from libraries, whispering foreign words to himself until dawn. She had worried for his health, for his tired eyes, but now she saw the fruit of every sleepless night. Before Hassan could scoff, Daniel's voice shifted again, this time sharp and rhythmic, Spanish. He spoke with the cadence of Madrid, clear and commanding. Then, before the sound of those words even faded, he glided into Mandarin, his tone and intonation flawless, each syllable measured and exact. The billionaire's smirk slipped further. His fingers tapped against the oak desk. Slower now. More thoughtful than mocking. His eyes followed Daniel's every move like a predator who suddenly realized his prey might have claws of its own. Daniel was not finished. He switched to German, his sentences crisp and heavy, delivered with a confidence that left no room for doubt. He followed with Russian, the guttural sounds rolling effortlessly from his lips. Then came Italian, warm and musical, before shifting into Japanese, his voice carrying the discipline of someone who had studied with devotion. Finally, he ended in Portuguese, speaking with the same ease as a native, his voice filling the vast office with the unmistakable truth of his mastery. 9 languages. 9. Each delivered with precision, not a trace of hesitation. Each a sword drawn from a scabbard, pointed not in arrogance but in unshakable conviction. When the last word fell into silence, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. The guards exchanged stunned glances. Even the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder. Daniel straightened and fixed his gaze directly on Hassan. "I told you, 9 languages, not learned from luxury tutors, not from traveling the world with money in my pocket." I learned them while my mother scrubbed floors in this very building. When she worked nights, I studied. When she brought home scraps of food, I read borrowed books by candlelight. I had no inheritance, no privilege, only her sacrifice, and my determination to make it mean something. Grace could no longer hold back her tears. They slid silently down her cheeks as she clutched her cleaning rag like it was a treasure. Every insult, every humiliation she had endured seemed to crumble in that moment. Her son had taken all the pain of poverty, all the bitterness of her sacrifice, and turned it into something neither money nor power could buy, knowledge that shone like armor around him. Hassan sat frozen, his once booming laughter gone. He leaned forward now, both elbows pressing into the desk, his rings clinking softly against the wood. His eyes narrowed, not in mockery, but in concentration, as though he were finally seeing the boy for the first time. Daniel did not back away. His voice was steady as he finished. "You mocked me because my mother cleans floors, but what you fail to understand is this. Greatness is not measured by wealth. It is measured by the fire within, and that fire does not come from gold. It comes from hunger, sacrifice, and knowledge." The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter could have been. The billionaire's empire loomed behind him, yet in that moment, it was clear who held the real power. Grace's heart swelled with pride, her tears flowing freely now, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming truth that her son had stood in front of a man who ruled nations with money, and made him listen. Hassan's smirk was gone. His eyes glimmered with something rare, something that no one in the room had ever seen from him before. Respect. For several long seconds, the room remained silent. The echo of Daniel's last words lingered in the air like a challenge no one dared to answer. Hassan al-Mansouri sat frozen behind his desk, his once confident smirk erased, his hands steepled together as his dark eyes studied the young man before him. The billionaire, who had mocked with thunderous laughter, was now staring as though he had discovered something rarer than oil or gold. Finally, Hassan rose from his seat. The leather chair creaked behind him as he pushed it back, and the sheer weight of his presence filled the room. He was tall, broad, a man built like a monument to power, and when he moved, everyone around him, guards included, straightened unconsciously. Daniel, however, did not flinch. He stood rooted in place, steady as stone, his gaze locked firmly on the man approaching him. Hassan circled Daniel slowly, his footsteps deliberate against the Persian rug. His voice, when it came, was low, controlled, and edged with something Daniel had not expected: curiosity. "Do you know, boy, what men like me fear the most?" Daniel did not hesitate. His answer came as swiftly as the languages he had spoken. "Ignorance." Hassan stopped mid-stride. The corner of his mouth twitched, not in mockery this time, but in genuine surprise. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, not the arrogant grin of a man used to humiliating others, but the smile of someone who recognized a truth that cut deep. "You are right," Hassan said softly, almost to himself. "Ignorance. The one thing no fortune can erase, no empire can overcome. Money can buy palaces, cars, power, but it cannot purchase wisdom. It cannot purchase hunger. And hunger, that is what I see in you." He turned, facing Grace now. The woman who had silently endured the weight of his arrogance for years stood trembling, her eyes shimmering with tears. Hassan's voice softened, in a way none of his employees had ever heard before. "Grace, forgive me. I laughed at your son because I thought I was looking at a cleaner's boy. But now, I see clearly. You did not raise a servant. You raised a lion." Grace's lips trembled, her tears flowing freely. But she said nothing. She didn't need to. Her son had already spoken everything her heart had carried in silence for decades. Hassan turned back to Daniel, his tone sharpening once more. "You could rule empires with that tongue of yours. You could negotiate peace, build nations, topple borders. Men would pay fortunes to have such a weapon on their side. If you wish, Daniel, I will open every door for you. Universities across the world, companies at your fingertips, resources beyond imagination. Whatever you desire, I can give it. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Grace looked at her son with wide eyes, the offer almost too enormous to comprehend. But Daniel did not falter. His shoulders remained squared, his voice calm yet filled with conviction. I thank you, sir, but I don't need your money to prove myself. All I ask for is opportunity, just a door to walk through. The rest I will build with my own hands. Hassan's expression shifted again, this time to something rare, something no one in that glittering tower of power had ever seen before. Respect. Not the shallow respect born of wealth or status, but the deep acknowledgement one man gives to another when he sees fire equal to his own. Slowly, Hassan extended his hand. The thick gold rings caught the light as he held it out, and Daniel, after a brief pause, stepped forward and clasped it firmly. Their handshake was not a transaction, not a bargain of wealth. It was a recognition, a silent vow between two men from entirely different worlds. Grace pressed her hands to her mouth, overcome with emotion. She had dreamed of many things for her son, but never had she imagined he would one day stand tall before a billionaire and make him bow his head in respect. Her sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the aching back, the humiliation she had endured, suddenly felt like seeds that had finally bloomed. Daniel released Hassan's hand and turned toward his mother. For the first time in years, he saw her not with pity for her hard life, but with pride. Pride in the woman who had given him everything without ever having anything herself. Hassan watched them quietly, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke one last time, his voice softer than it had ever been. Remember this moment, Daniel. Wealth fades, empires crumble, but knowledge endures. You reminded me of something I had long forgotten. Daniel gave a small nod, his gaze steady. And you reminded me, sir, that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. With that, he turned and walked out of the office beside his mother, their steps in perfect rhythm. The guards who had once smirked now stared after him in silence, their faces etched with disbelief. And when the doors closed behind them, Hassan remained standing in the golden light of his vast office, his whisper barely audible, yet carrying more weight than any roar he had ever given. Truly, the greatest wealth is not gold, but knowledge. Tears filled Grace's eyes as she watched her son stand tall, making a billionaire bow his head. In that moment, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every wound on her hands found meaning. The world finally saw what she had always known. Her son was her greatest victory.